Welcome, welcome. You know, the most awkward parts of any presentation are the beginning and the end. Because like usually when you walk on stage or when I start here, I don't know what to say, right? It's like, what is my opening line and do I have anything specific to get into the flow? Best case scenario, you have a joke, right? To warm up the crowd. But doing jokes virtually is kind of impossible because I have no feedback. So it's just me laughing at my own jokes. And also the ending of any presentation is kind of difficult because usually it's just like, yeah, hey, that was my presentation. That's it. But Chrysalis, right? We have some exciting stuff to talk about today. We have a really big AMA show. I think it's over 90 questions. So today I'll go a little bit over. Maybe we'll do like 90 minutes because I think it's important to answer most of your questions. And in addition to that, we have a very exciting announcement today, which I'm going to share now on my screen. 1 second. The network date. This has been the most important thing to define, right? When are we going to do the network upgrade? And we have a very concrete date now. April 21st will be the day when we are going to start the migration period, meaning that beginning of April 21st, we will have a burned address. You will be able to download the Firefly wallet, and then you'll be able to transition to the new network, to the new Chrysalis network. And then on April 28th, the Chrysalis network itself will launch, right? That is like the big day when the network upgrade is starting and is sort of going to be complete. And after the 28th, you can continue to migrate from the current IOTA network to this new network. But basically the old legacy network will only be able to support the transition. And by then the Chrysalis upgrade is complete and we have entered the new dawn, right? And I think this is a very important milestone for us because so far there were a few unknowns in determining this date. Most important for us is obviously the exchanges, because exchanges have to support the migration. I think like at least 40 to 50% of the entire IOTA supply is on exchanges today. So it was important for us that we coordinate with them and that they are, first of all, fully aware of what Chrysalis is and what the changes are going to be. And more importantly, that we are able to support them with the transition, like migrating their tokens from cold storage and hot wallets, and also really enable them to integrate IOTA with Chrysalis, which means that they are able to support deposits and withdrawals, right? And we've been in discussion with them for quite some time, which is why we weren't able to define the date yet. But after the discussions that we've had this week with all the big exchanges that support IOTA, including Bitfinex, Binance, Huobi, OKX, Bitpanda, and so on, we basically came to the conclusion that April 21st for the migration date made the most sense. Obviously, this is sort of a disappointment with our Q1 deadline, or not a timeline or estimated timeline that we set forth ourselves. It was also our own objective to do Q1 for Chrysalis, but that became increasingly impossible because if your largest market tells you they're only able to start the migration early April, you're faced with a difficult decision, right? Are you going to rush through the upgrade now, or do you cause like 3-4 weeks delays and try to make sure that all of the big players are able to support you and everything is really optimized, fine-tuned, and ready for the launch? And at the end of the day, we help to develop an open source protocol that is worth billions of dollars, right? So trust in IOTA, trust in the foundation, and trust in our decisions is the most important thing to us. And that's why we came to the conclusion that 21st of April and 28th makes the most sense. And here we are. So this is very exciting because now we have a very concrete timeline. We know when it's going to happen. And Next week, we have the Firefly wallet coming out. So we've already been testing it. I've also shown it on the show a few times now. I was showing off in the community. And next week, all of you will be able to join it. I think one thing that has been missing with Chrysalis so far is really just being able to engage with you more closely in it, right? Because right now, more of the developers, more of the hardcore IOTA fans that know how to set up a node, that know how to utilize a command line wallet have been able to interact in the network. And I would say it's been around 300, 400 people that were engaged in this so far. And now with Firefly coming out and going into beta, all of you will be able to download the wallet, will be able to create a wallet, will be able to create your own account, new addresses, and be able to experience Chrysalis in full, which hasn't been possible yet, right? And I think we're going to have a lot of fun, and it's going to be very engaging to really understand how this new IOTA looks like. And already now, before the official mainnet upgrade, you will be able to utilize and really understand what Chrysalis means to IOTA. So I think that will be very exciting. And that's going to start next week. Most likely early next week, you'll be able to download the Firefly wallet. And then we can start sending around some testnet tokens. So that will be very exciting. And so with that in mind, right, we have about 1 month for the biggest network upgrade in our history. And more of Mana and more of everything else that we've been working on, we'll discuss on Friday. And without further ado, I think we should do the AMA because there is a lot to talk about. Let me zoom in. All right. Hi, Dom. What are your thoughts on the recent multi-week attack on the Feelers Nano blockchain, which has been putting stress on the validators and slowing the network to a crawl? How resilient is the Tangle to such an attack? Very good question. You know, one interesting point that I always try to make when I compare permissioned versus permissionless networks is the point that permissionless networks are being battle tested in real time, right? There's a big incentive to attack a network like IOTA, attack a network like Nano, to bring the network to halt, to try and steal funds. And that also means that we are really improving these networks all the time because we are all the time under attack. We're all the time, if there's a bug, it will be exposed, right? So we're constantly aiming at improving the technologies that we have out there. And that's one of the main reasons why big companies are now moving towards permissionless networks, because they realize that permissioned networks, they might be fine for certain use cases, for certain playgrounds. But if you really want to build entire ecosystems on top, you want to make sure that you're building on battle-tested technology. The thing about Nano, obviously, similarly to IOTA, it is feelers and it has similar issues. Fundamentally, it's about nothing being there for free, and there's always being trade-offs, right? And what I think makes the most sense for a project like Nano is to really look more closely on our research with Mana. We just published the blog post today on how Mana is going to function, answering more questions, because Mana really is one of these very, very important concepts that actually enables feeless transactions while making sure that this sort of rate control and spam prevention is implemented in the protocol. And we're happy to help out because ultimately, all of the work that we do is open source, is free to use, and is also there to benefit others. And I think we're more than happy to engage with the Nano community as well in this to figure out how some of our technologies can be utilized to help them out here. When it comes to IOTA itself, we are aware of these issues, and I think we've been aware of them since the inception of IOTA, which is why we are obviously working on Coinbase and have Mana. And the objective is that over the next few weeks, with Schiener and with all of the Mana components being implemented and integrated, we'll be able to test this in real time, right? And I think that will be a very exciting playground as well. And I think the major point here is that with Chrysalis, we have this very clear path towards Corticide, and Corticide is what makes IOTA production ready. And so we need to make sure that we actually battle test Corticide, because IOTA has really been battle tested so far. And I think that's really great in that regard, because we had these attacks as well in the past. Yeah. Right, there's another question. Dom, I'm also specifically curious how successful you believe IOTA 1.5 versus 2.0 will be in warding off such an attack, i.e. is the Tangle even less vulnerable to something like this post-Corticide? One important point to keep in mind is that we have implemented the dust protection. That means if such an attack actually happens, it doesn't bloat the database in IOTA. We do have snapshots as well. Right, so with that already, we are preventing such an attack to cripple the network to a halt. And there's various other ways that we can actually prevent such an attack, like increasing the proof of work requirements and stuff like that, right? Ultimately, every DLT out there has this problem in one way or another, right? All of us want to be production ready. All of us want to enable 20, 30, 40, 50,000 transactions per second, because that is what's required to be production ready. And if you think about these numbers, you're talking about gigabytes of data being passed around, right, through the network and having to be stored on all of the nodes. So it really becomes a bottleneck, and all of the networks out there have to think about how they're actually able to scale, not just from a transaction confirmation standpoint, but also really on how they are able to store the transactions, which kind of nodes are able to participate, and so on. Because in Bitcoin today, I think the database is how much? 200, 300 gigabytes. Ethereum, same problem. You can't even sync up from the Genesis reliably, because it's very difficult to get the transactions and to verify each transaction, because you're not really able to keep up with the network itself. Right. So it's really interesting in general. And I think even with such an attack on Nano happening, or with these attacks having happened on IOTA, they're really there to help us move towards production readiness, because without these attacks, we are not able to prove that they have been battle tested. And we need to make sure that, first of all, hackers have these incentives, which they have with cryptocurrencies. And then we obviously can come up with solutions on how to solve these problems. And with Mana, we exactly have such a solution. So I think to answer your question, we've really thought very, very thoroughly about these problems, because doing feeless obviously has its trade-offs. And the biggest trade-off is simply that such attacks can be possible under certain circumstances, right? Because there's no transaction fees. And so it becomes rather cheap to do some of these attacks. But exactly because of that, we spend so much time to think about rate control mechanisms for Corticide. So I can highly encourage all of you to read up on Mana, on this new blog post. And tomorrow we have another blog post coming out about rate control. And I think maybe on Friday we can invite Luigi or even Billy on the show to talk about Mana. I think that would be very interesting. And we can also talk about this attack then, actually. I think that would be better. Android Hornet Node app question. I think you're asking the wrong person here, sorry. Can we get an Android Node app that is downloadable for simple install from the Google Play Store? There are plenty of Android media devices, TV boxes coming out now with 4 gigabyte built-in RAM. Or under that should be able to run a node. Yes, run an IOTA node, like installing an app on your phone, for example, Android box. Oh, okay, I get it. So basically the question is about having an easy to install node. I love the idea. I think that's a really great idea. Muxer and Luca from the IF and the community always complain about people using bad hardware to run a node on, right? Because one of the problems is if your node is not capable enough, it doesn't have enough resources and enough power, your node is going to crumble when high transaction throughput is happening. And what that means is that your node is going to fall off, and as such is no longer able to broadcast transactions in the network. And if that is the case, you're going to have these holes in the network, and it will be much more difficult for the transactions to pass through in the entire IOTA peer-to-peer network, which means that the confirmation rate will go down. Something similar recently happened in the Chrysalis testnet, where people use Raspberry Pis or similar, and they don't even use SSDs, for example, just use the SD card, which means that the operations to execute and to store the transactions on the node itself, on the Raspberry Pi, are not able to keep up with the transaction throughput. So the node falls off, makes a hole in the peer-to-peer network, and transaction can no longer be distributed or broadcast in the network, which leads to worse confirmation times and also confirmations in general. So that's a very important point to keep in mind when it comes to running an IOTA node. Obviously, our objective as the IOTA Foundation is to decrease the requirements for running a node gradually. I think we'll get there over the next few months, especially now with Chrysalis out. I'm not sure if these requirements will be sufficient, to be honest. I think there should be, but I would prefer if one of the core devs gives more input on that. But in general, running an IOTA node, like installing an app on your phone, that should absolutely be the goal. I really think that the objective of a project like IOTA is that ultimately everybody will have some kind of smart home device where an IOTA node is going to run on, and it will be able to plug itself in, like, for example, a router. Everybody has a router. Routers have enough space, take up enough space where you can have sufficient hardware running on it, and obviously it has the connectivity so that you're able to peer with the IOTA network, and you don't have to rely on any third party to be your node, right? I think that's really the objective, and this is really where we as a IOTA Foundation should also think about which partners we can work with to pre-install IOTA nodes on that hardware. So we'll definitely go down that route, and I can only encourage all of you to really engage with us on Discord so we can also better understand what you're thinking about. But I mean, something like that sounds like a brilliant idea, and we should absolutely do it. You know, one interesting question, and I'm still trying to figure this out, is like, what are really the use cases of IOTA in the smart home realm? Because smart home is like IoT devices, right? It's about speakers, it's about automating your workflow. But I'm personally not really a big fan of the current smart home environment, and obviously it's security and the way that it's set up, because I'm never going to buy an Alexa for obvious privacy reasons. So I'm just trying to envision what smart home really means and how IOTA could play a big role there. I think the biggest component there will be IOTA access, where you can have this secure access control for devices and sort of like a decentralized if this then that. But we're moving towards that, right? And yeah, let's think about this, and let's think about how we can enable this over the next few weeks. Oh, this is an interesting one. Will IOTA be part of the German digital vaccination card, or are there intentions to be part of it? And is the foundation in conversation with the German government about the coming German ID card in September? To simply answer your question, we don't know if we'll be part of the German digital vaccination card. What's very exciting is that UBERG successfully won the German vaccination passport. So congrats to them on achieving that. As all of you know, UBERG utilizes several blockchains, including IOTA, to store the hashes of these certificates. And we don't know yet which technologies they will be using for the vaccination passport. And I think, as they already announced themselves, over the next few weeks, or I think maybe in the next few days, they are going to announce this themselves on how this is going to look like with the vaccination passport. What I can imagine is, because this is government, they're not going to be able to speak about it for quite some time, because there's always like very strict communication guidelines and who you can speak to and who you cannot speak to. And there's also a third party involved, which is IBM. So I think right now we can only wait. But it's very exciting that not some big corporation won it, but it's really a smaller technology company like Uberge. And we are quite close with them. We speak with them regularly, and they are engaged with us. And so I think generally we will progress there. Overall, our objective as the IOTA Foundation is to develop IOTA identity, right? Because identity is one of these holy grails where IOTA can play a key role for these verifiable credentials. So you don't store your data on the Tangle. That is not the goal. The goal is only to store the proof to certain statements and to leverage the IOTA distributed ledger for this verifiability and data immutability. And our identity protocol is getting very, very close to being a full beta release. And the vaccination passport is one of the, I would say, sub-projects that we're currently working on. And we are very much engaging with US counterparts there, including the government. So I think over the next few weeks, we'll see how and which role IOTA can play in the vaccination passport for some of these countries. But nonetheless, you can be sure that identity for us is one of the most important and most strategic adoption projects. So we are investing more resources to accelerate it, and we are already working with some banks on KYC verifications. And I really also think for DeFi, IOTA identity can be really exciting, because KYC and AML will be an important part for the future for adoption. And doing it with IOTA ensures privacy and also ensures security. And I think that will be very exciting. So you can definitely expect more in that. And as I said, like the motto of this year is tangible adoption. Right? I want all of you to be able to download an IOTA app on your phone and register your identity and use this identity in our ecosystem, or have a device that stores data and is able to monetize this data. That's what we mean with tangible adoption. All of it will be made possible this year. And so I think that's really what's exciting about this new path that we're taking. Because so far, every time we had a big partnership announcement with Jaguar Land Rover, with Dell, and so on, it's very exciting, but it's not tangible, because ultimately it's always about, how does this impact me? How does this impact my life? And when can I utilize it? Right? And oftentimes it's several years until you can utilize it, and until the company will go from proof of concept, MVP, towards product release. And this year we are really doing tangible adoption, also with smart contracts. So I think it will be very exciting, and you can expect a lot more. And with that, adoption in the USA equals Coinbase. I think DRTM4 answered that. Just let him wink. Coinbase is going public. I think that's really exciting for them. I think the next important market for them will be Europe. And because Coinbase is predominantly in the US, and I don't think they even offer accounts in Germany, if I'm not mistaken. So Europe is a very important growth area for Coinbase, and IOTA is one of the largest, if not the largest, project out of Germany, right? And I think we are the largest, right? I don't know if anybody else is actually in Germany. Like most of them are either Switzerland or Singapore, but they have some development offices here in Berlin. But anyways, of course, we're speaking with all of these large exchanges, and many of them understand the magnitude of Chrysalis. And just recently, we spoke with an exchange, and the feedback was the integration effort of IOTA with Chrysalis is magnitudes more simpler and also more secure. And I think that's exactly the kind of feedback that we want to get to confidently speak with new exchange partners. I think the primary goal for us over the next few weeks should be to gather more exchanges and to also be part of new ecosystems. And what I mean with that specifically is to be able to get the IOTA token to different ecosystems, like, for example, be able to wrap IOTA on Ethereum and that type of stuff. And we're really moving towards that. And you will be able to utilize your IOTA tokens in different ways to earn interest, to stake them in various different networks. So I think all of that is really coming together over the next few weeks. And Chrysalis is really the enabler for all of that. So I cannot confirm anything, but the objective ultimately is to get on all the large exchanges. And we have really very little adoption in the US right now when it comes to exchanges, and it's still a pain in the ass to buy and sell IOTA tokens there. So we have some big work to do there. But we'll get there. What will happen to address that contain less than 1 MI after Chrysalis? First of all, what is Chrysalis? All right, some kind of anime stuff. What will happen to address that contain less than 1 MI after Chrysalis? Basically, what you can do is you can send some tokens to them and sweep them, right? 1 MI is the current limit. It's about $130, $140, right? But we can lower it. Right now the thinking is 1 MI, but we could do 100 KI, right? So 100 kilo IOTA, just to lower the limit itself. We're really not stuck to the 1 MI limit. And ultimately with Corticide, there will be a different dust protection altogether. And right now this is temporary, I would say, simply because we need to have a solution to dust. As we've seen with Nano, it can really cause the database to blow up. And with Chrysalis, we need to have this implemented so that we have this protection mechanism. And what you can do with your 1 MI, if you know it's going to happen, why don't you do it right now? To put all of those 1 MI addresses and transition them. Just so you know, the way that the transition is going to work with Chrysalis, and especially with the Firefly wallet, is that you can choose all of the addresses that you want to migrate. So as part of the migration, you can already transition all of your 1 MI balances to one larger balance, right? And that's easily possible. And I encourage you to just do that, basically. Hey Dom, is IOTA the only permissionless protocol for IoT being standardized right now? Or are you aware of other protocols that have taken this step also? From what I am aware of, IOTA is the only protocol that is really targeting the IoT. All of the other protocols are claiming to do that because they say, yeah, we enable machine-to-machine transactions, but ultimately they have very different requirements and also very different use cases because their primary focus is to do smart contracts, and all of the smart contract players right now are on the DeFi train. And I think that IOTA is really the only reputable and the only serious player that is focused and working on IoT cases right now. So not just the standardization, like leaving the standardization aside, we are really focused on IoT. And you're really seeing that with Chrysalis and with Corticide, because the focus is that your home router, your IoT gateway is able to run an IOTA node and is able to participate in the network. So that is already a given. When it comes to the standardization, I think we're one of the only protocols, permissionless protocols, that is taking standardization very seriously. And we have a sort of head of standardization in the foundation. And next week, we have another OMG meeting. I see there's another question here. I'll answer that later. But next week, we have another OMG meeting to progress here as well. The strategy is still the same, right? We have layer 2 solutions like streams, like identity, where we already are using standards like W3C standards. But we can always do more, and the core focus is to standardize the IOTA protocol. And I think we have really sort of changed our development process to move towards RFCs, where we define and specify how certain features or how certain components of the protocol should look like and how they should be implemented. And these RFCs are really a great basis also for standards then. And what's really going to push us forward with the standardization is a sort of yellow paper for corticide. This is something that the research team is currently working on. And I hope that with the Nectar release, we will actually be able to publish that yellow paper as well. And you can think about the yellow paper basically as specification of the protocol from the research side, how certain variables are should be implemented, and certain characteristics of the protocol and so on. I think that will be a great basis for the standardization work. But yeah, like, I think we're the only project that really takes standardization very seriously. That's why we're also represented in all of these different working groups and are also really leading the Tangle EE working group under the Eclipse Foundation. Are there any other major announcements besides Chrysalis and Firefly in the following weeks? like I don't know. I don't know what I should tell you. You know, if I would answer this, I would get so much hate for doing pre-announcements. But the thing about crypto is that we never sleep. Right? There's always stuff to do. There's always stuff that we're working on, and most of the time, stuff that you work on for 6 to 8 months, or like stuff needs 6 to 8 months to fully develop. And we have a pipeline of full progress because we're not just doing Chrysalis, we're doing corticide, we're doing layer 2, smart contracts, identity, streams, access. We're doing all of that at once, right, at the same time. And of course, there's a lot to talk about. And we as an ecosystem, like, the very exciting thing is that when people stop asking me for announcements and where they really just happen in the community, because somebody just says, hey, I'm a big company and I've integrated IOTA in my use cases, come join our product and try it out. Right? That's really what permissionless innovation is all about, where you no longer have to ask us at the foundation about progress, but where the ecosystem itself is really producing all of the progress. And that's exactly happening right now, right? And I think that's really the next exciting phase where the whens and the soons are no longer going to be produced by us, and where we are no longer the only ones to be blamed, but it's all going to be done by the ecosystem. And that's really how we become an even more bigger player in this space. I think with smart contracts and with digital assets coming out over the next few weeks, we'll definitely progress towards that self-sustainable ecosystem. Let me read this. What's the latest with the standardization process with OMG? Is it in pause mode moving forward or hit the dead end? Haven't heard too much about it lately. When it comes to standardization, this is what we've said since a long time. It's a year-long process, or not years, right? It takes years to standardize a protocol because there's different phases that it needs to go through, different review processes and RFPs and so on. And it just takes time. So you have to give it time, right? And be patient about it. Mike, actually, and who's sort of our head of standardization, answered it here. So that's great. Wow, really hyped about your reply. Okay, I guess I should read Mike's answer. So this is paraphrasing Mike. The basic IOTA protocol that is to be standardized is the corticide version. So that will enter the standards process when it is stable. Just so you know, when it is stable is the yellow paper, which comes out over the next few weeks. Meanwhile, there are many other things to progress as standards, starting with streams, where OMG has released the RFP, to which IOTA will respond with a specification based on the stream spec, along with Scali. So that's great. So RFP is basically a request for proposal. And streams, if you guys go to the GitHub streams repo, you can really see a very serious specification of the protocol. So it's really great that we have that. And I encourage all of you to take a look at that. At OMG, we have also refined an RFI on disposable SSI. SSI is self-sovereign identity, which IOTA will respond to and is working on. And now working on an RFI for smart contracts. These RFIs would be followed by RFP and IOTA response for a standard. In Q2, we also start on oracles and others. So as Mike is saying, we are working on everything, right? We are starting with layer 2, specifically with streams, because streams is very much specified already. And we're moving down the stack towards a protocol with Corticide. So it's moving forward. It is slow, as we always mentioned, but we're making progress. So I think that's great. Redditor Guest Basic brought it up this week in his post about energy consumption. Is the IOTA Foundation going to do research on energy consumption versus other cryptos and custodians? A greener world is getting more and more attention, and for adoption from governments, a bottleneck if blockchain solution costs so much energy. Absolutely, and you know, when people always ask us, what is the major difference between Bitcoin and IOTA, right? I always try to really emphasize the point that blockchain in its current stage is not sustainable. We cannot think that it's acceptable that so much energy is being wasted to enable and to secure these systems. Right? That is really why so much effort, so much resources, so much time was invested to come up with new approaches that are no longer based on blockchain, that are not based on miners. And it's not just IOTA who is leading this, but there's multiple different protocols that are implementing proof of stake and so on, that are really leading this green revolution. That I applaud all of them, because moving away from proof of work is one of the most important next steps of DLT, because we cannot waste so much energy and really expect to go towards mainstream adoption. I think that's actually kind of reckless if we go down that path, because we are in this sort of existential crisis of our future, and we need to be very serious and really consider which technologies we adopt and which technologies we support. And the focus on IOTA has always been to solve these bottlenecks of blockchain and of Bitcoin by no longer having miners, by no longer wasting electricity, and by no longer having fees. That is how we future-proof our tech. And to answer your question, we'll definitely publish more about the energy consumption, also doing comparisons. I think that is best done by a third party, like a university or some kind of research institute that looks at this independently without any influence and makes these comparisons. And I think we as the IOTA Foundation should definitely support this type of research, because now we need to drive awareness. Even NFT, right? If you buy an NFT and it uses as much electricity as an entire household for weeks on end, you just really start to question, like, what is going on here? And does any of this really make sense? And like my clear answer is no, it absolutely fucking doesn't. And we have to be careful how we progress here. And it just gives us at IOTA really this drive to speed things up and to really go further, because it is a clear statement, a clear testament that we are on the right path with our tech, that feeless, no miners, no energy waste, and obviously scalable and not blockchain-based is the future. And we're already seeing this with other technologies that are taking the prime spot from Ethereum away, like, for example, Binance Smart Chain. And this is really how it's going to progress, where the playing field is going to be evened out even more over the next few months because of these environmental issues and concerns, but also because of transaction fees and because of scalability issues. And it just puts us in a very exciting spot then, and it really increases this drive to move forward even faster. So So I think everybody in the foundation is very excited for this, and we really believe in a greener, more equitable future. And we have to build it together with all of you in the IOTA ecosystem. So I think that will be very exciting. And what are the current hurdles on IOTA adoption in business and industry? Why do we only see isolated pilot projects so far and, for example, no productive integration into the products and services of companies? What feedback do you get from industry on this, and how is the IOTA Foundation trying to improve adoption? The key strategy of the IOTA Foundation since its inception has been to work on the core protocol, to work on the building blocks, like the library, like the wallet, and at the same time to drive and nurture this adoption in the ecosystem. That's why we engage more closely with corporates and with startups as well, to first of all educate them on what IOTA is, what it isn't, and also which kind of use cases are possible with that. And in addition to that, what we at the foundation also do is this sort of development of projects. Initially, we did a lot of proof of concepts as well with big companies, but now we're moving more towards this, I would say, advisor role, where we're advising them on how to implement things. And this is basically where we stand right now. And the core focus of the IOTA Foundation is still to nurture the ecosystem around it. But the objective is that the ecosystem itself is being productive without the IOTA Foundation holding hands, providing input all the time, and so on. And this is really where we are right now. And that's a very exciting proof of the progress that we've made so far. Now, when it comes to corporate adoption, we have to keep in mind that those are really large corporations with thousands of employees, with clear processes on how things should work. And oftentimes they have innovation departments. The innovation department is there to experiment on new technologies. And blockchain and IOTA is still part of the innovation department. It's not yet part of any specific products, right? It's still in this experimentation phase. But the focus is, by being production ready, that these products are enabled. Now, when it comes to a big company, the innovation cycle is not like in crypto where you have these crazy things where daily things are changing, right? Corporations are used to year-long product cycles where you really start out with a concept, you hold thousands of meetings on whatever is important to further develop the idea to a concept, implement it, do thousands of tests, whatever, right? And then you have a product. Like, this is like a year-long process. It's different in different industries, but it takes time. Usually, what a good measure is usually from the first contact to an NDA, like a non-disclosure agreement, is about 6 months. Sometimes it can be faster, but relationship building takes time. And last year, we made this decision to no longer focus on high-level adoption, but really go deep with corporate partners and do it with a few companies that we really believe in IOTA, and where we really think that these pilot cases can help us to further increase the awareness and the adoption of IOTA. And that's why we focus very closely to work with Dell. That's why we work very closely with Zebra and with a bunch of others that haven't been announced yet. Right? And this is really where we already now have products that are built on IOTA. Right? We do have Elbarium, we do have Zebra, and we do have other stuff that we're working on right now. So it's fast to say that IOTA hasn't really been used in products and services yet. I think what we have to keep in mind is we are only now really clearly moving towards production readiness. And I think the adoption over the next few months is only going to increase exponentially, because IOTA is in a complete new phase. It is a complete new project, so to say. And many of the companies that are looking at our progress are really excited about the way that we've evolved. And it's only going to increase with smart contracts, with identity, with access, with oracles, and so on. And I think those like frameworks that are built on top of IOTA will be a clearer path towards adoption. Maybe one important thing to mention as well is when have a technology like IOTA, it becomes really hard to pitch it because it is sort of a universal protocol that can be applied in many different industries, right? It could be an audit trail for a bank. It could be an audit trail for supply chain tracking. It could be utilized for machine-to-machine payments, for the insurance industry, for the mobility industry, all of these different use cases. So it's sort of an agnostic platform to build on. And many companies need to have a specific product that they can say, hey, this is how much it costs. This is where the API that I can plug it into. And this is the integration effort. With IOTA, we don't have that yet. We don't have a specific product that is built on top by us, where you can say, hey, this is how much it's going to cost, and this is the integration effort. It's still in this innovation phase. And I think with Chrysalis, we're moving towards this production readiness for IOTA and also for the adoption. So to summarize, I think the adoption of IOTA has been working out really, really well. Because we haven't been ready, we've always been saying that we are still a beta version. I think we've done a really phenomenal job to drive the awareness of IOTA and to really get it adopted by some of these large household names like Dell Technologies, like Zebra, even though it's not really a household name, but Jaguar Land Rover and all of those companies, they're all very excited about what we are building and the ecosystem that we're building. And right now, the most important thing is just this relationship building that we've been doing over the past few years. And this will only increase over the next few months. And who knows, right? There's many companies that are looking at IOTA right now without even speaking to the IOTA Foundation. And that's totally fine, because that's what it's all about. And the less we as the foundation are involved, the better. Because that's what this permissionless ecosystem is all about. Hey, Dom, is there any good reason for me as a normal person to host a node and earn mana? I could only think of selling it to a company somehow in the future, which needs more bandwidth of the Tangle, if that is even possible. Very good question. I think some of this was answered in this mana post here already. But to answer your question, why should you host your own node? One of the main reasons why you want to host your own node is to not be dependent on any third party to provide you with information on the Tangle. Because that is also sort of a security problem in the future if you're transferring high value transactions or if your business really depends on it. I think as a normal person, most of the time you're not going to want to set up your own node. You just want to rely on the nodes that are provided by the community. But as we discussed previously, I think the way that we are progressing towards is that everybody will be able to have their own node installed in a router, installed in some kind of smart home device, and be able to participate in the IOTA network without even knowing it. And I think that's really how we should progress as the project. To answer your question, the way that mana is going to work is that you can delegate your tokens to a node. To earn mana, you will probably split it with that node then as well. But I think all of this is going to develop over the next few weeks when we have the Nectar release, so that all of you can also play around with this and figure out how the dynamics are going to work. And honestly, we don't know ourselves yet how the economies of mana and of IOTA are going to develop with the mana marketplace and so on. So I think it will be very exciting to explore this together with you guys. Let me maybe also answer this question. Yes, and what would be the reason for a company to buy our mana? Can you give a sample case of why someone would buy the mana? The main reason why somebody would buy mana is, first of all, because they don't want to buy IOTA tokens, right? If you buy IOTA tokens, you generate a certain amount of mana. So you are basically, you have a pre-allocated slot in the transaction throughput of the network. And maybe a company doesn't want to be exposed to IOTA, or they are not able to hold it because of custody requirements, because of security, or just because of legal and regulatory reasons. That is a case where they would want to buy mana, and then it becomes simply a transaction that they do with their fiat money, right? The other reason why they would want to buy mana is because they're not able to, because of the economies, right? economics, because it's cheaper to buy mana to enable your transaction throughput if you need more transactions in a certain period, right? For example, what we have in energy markets today is like peak periods where the energy prices go up so much that you need to buy this excess amount of energy at higher prices. Like all of this is going to develop over the next few weeks when we have the Nectar release. But I think the primary reason why a company would want to buy mana is if they don't want to acquire IOTA tokens and they don't feel comfortable being exposed to holding IOTA and to be exposed to the crypto market. But the focus of us at the IOTA Foundation is to provide this flexibility so that anybody can utilize the protocol in the way they want to. Hi Dom, does the Firefly beta release next week mean a delay for the Chrysalis mainnet launch, i.e. not being released in March? Thanks for doing this, MAs. Interesting question. I think we just answered that in the beginning. Just to recap, right? It's going live on the 28th of April. And next week, we're going to have the Firefly beta that allows all of you to participate. Hi, Dom. What's the strategy the IF should adopt in order to convince companies and funds to start playing the role of infrastructure partners? What about going through the Linux Foundation, which already have big established companies? I think the way that this is going to play out is we're going to have 1 or 2 big companies announce that they've acquired IOTA tokens. And that is going to cause this ripple effect where other companies start to realize, first of all, this makes total sense, right? Acquiring IOTA tokens, having it as a utility for your use case, right? And also having it as an investment, as an asset to basically hedge yourself against the inflation, against unnecessary risk, and also be part of this machine economy. And I think this narrative is only going to come clearer over the next few weeks as we release Nectar. And I think our role, and especially my role as part of the IOTA Foundation, is to educate the market and also educate our partners on what the value proposition of IOTA is. Because so far, cryptocurrencies are very interesting speculative assets. But I think with mana and with this whole digital infrastructure play, IOTA is moving into a very different league where it's not just a speculative asset, but where it's there to provide your utility, where it's there to enable your use case, while at the same time being an investable and highly liquid asset, right? I think one of the major benefits that cryptocurrencies have are their liquidity. You can go in and out of this market, and the liquidity of the IOTA market is only going to increase over the next few weeks, which makes it much easier for large companies to also take larger positions. Because a big company may want to allocate 10, 20 million. And Tesla allocated how much? 2.5 billion, from what I remember, to Bitcoin. Something like that wouldn't be possible on IOTA today. So yeah, I think just give it time. We are working on, for one, educating the market more on what this value proposition of IOTA actually is. And second, with mana, with Nectar, we have a very exciting new network that all of you can participate in to really also try out what this future of IOTA looks like and how it will work out concretely. So over the next few weeks, it will come. And I already mentioned before, I think in one of the very first IOTA talks, I mentioned that Q2 is all going to be about token economics. So I'm going to hold true to that promise and do more discussions around the token economics of IOTA. Sorry, I need to drink more. You know, I must say it's kind of difficult to do 1 hour speech without any breaks, but we'll go through it. Hello, Dom. Last week you mentioned that Nectar is aimed to be released in April. Will there be any end-user applications of products that we can test, whether it's from the IF or an industrial partner? I remember a while back a use case where you could pay some IOTAs to feed, I believe, a sheep. And that was silly, but it's something fun anyone could interact with easily. And for us, non-decimated the tech real. That's a really funny example, because I remember first seeing this and I was like, is this actually real, right? I can feed a sheep in Eastern Europe. So the person that did the IOTA sheep is still in the community. I hope he's gonna implement Mana in his barn. Let's see. But yeah, good question. We as IF are right now really focused on the node implementation. There is like an easy to use dashboard where you can see how much mana you're generating and stuff like that. There is a faucet where you can claim IOTA tokens. I think as we move towards Nectar, and as we have everything fully specified and documented, we're going to see many more applications being built on top of GoShimmer and the GoShimmer network. And yeah, what I can definitely say is that there will definitely be use cases that you can try out. And if you have some ideas of what we should do, just let us know, because I think our role as the IOTA Foundation is really also education. Because if we can think about some kind of game or some kind of education tool to really explain Mana in more clear terms, we will absolutely do it and we will fund it. Right? We have a ecosystem development fund. Fundamentally, this is just going to be IOTA, right? Machine-to-machine payments, feeless micropayments, and it should be very simple, or let's say not simple, but it should be much simpler to transition from Chrysalis, the Chrysalis network, to IOTA. So the changes that applications have to make to work on the GoShimmer network are also much less than they are right now. So to answer your question, yeah, absolutely. I think we will have applications that are going to be built on top of Nectar. And I hope that we can convince the IOTA sheeps to upgrade to Nectar as well. Oh, that sounds interesting. Actually, paying IOTA to feed livestock is something we will be trialing in Wales, UK in 2022. That's cool. So if you want to upgrade, you should definitely upgrade to Nectar as well, because we should have Corticide by then. But it sounds really interesting, this use case. This will allow sponsors to fund the care of retired racehorses. I had an interesting discussion with the potential partner this week, and the use case goes as follows. You have a forest, and the forests in Germany are really in a bad shape. I think only around 20% of all trees in Germany are healthy. That means that we need to invest much more resources to improve the health of the forest and to also plant new trees. And one interesting use case is to actually utilize drones to scan the area and to help to build up the nutrition and the health of the soil, to then, with some kind of I'll just call it a gun, right? A gun on the drone that is able to inject seeds into the soil, so that the new tree can grow. And then the drone can continuously fly over that area and look at the ground and look at how the trees are evolving and so on. And that's actually a very interesting use case for IOTA, because IOTA can be this trust protocol so that you can compare the data, and so that you can also do some very interesting stuff. Like what we were discussing is to have NFTs for each of these trees. So I could actually donate money. And if I donate money, I want to make sure that the tree is going to be planted. And what we can do now with IOTA is the drone is going to inject it into the ground. We have an NFT that is tied to the tree. And I own this NFT. I can always trade it, right? But I own this NFT, and the drone is going to continuously, through an oracle, give me status updates, how the tree is doing, how it's growing, and I can also compare it, right? I think that's a very interesting use case where IOTA, where NFTs can be applied in the real world, and where we can enable such a use case. And there's many more ideas. We also have a very crazy idea of doing a DAO. So think about having a decentralized autonomous organization. And this DAO is basically a fund. So people can donate money to this fund. And the fund now obviously has some operations. And the operations of the fund are to operate satellites, are to operate drones. They just scan areas. And with the fund of the DAO, you acquire forests. It sounds kind of crazy, but it's basically like a REIT. It's a real estate investment fund. And the fund acquires the forest, makes sure that it's not going to be torn down, is not going to be monetized by farmers, but where you allow the ecological system of the entire forest to really thrive, right? Because nobody owns it but the DAO, and there's no profit intention behind it. And I think all of these ideas are super exciting, right? And I think we as the IOTA ecosystem should really think more about how we can enable them as we move forward with digital assets, with smart contracts. And I think all of that will be very exciting. And you can be sure that we're going to do some of these crazy ideas in the near future, where IOTA is being used in the real world, right? And where we utilize these new decentralized concepts with smart contracts. And will digital euro based on IOTA infrastructure? Thanks. Yes, it's possible, right? There's different ways that you can do a digital euro. The most simple one is to do an IOU. Basically, that means you have a bank account. You accept deposits into the bank account. Somebody deposits 1,000 euros. And this 1,000 euros is then just digitized on IOTA through digital assets. Now you have 1,000 tokenized assets on IOTA, and these you can then trade, and they represent €1, meaning that somebody else who has this digital asset is able to come to the bank and claim the physical, real euro in that regard. Right? Simple system, and it's basically just e-money. It's less exciting and less interesting. The really exciting stuff is algorithmic stablecoins. And algorithmic stablecoins is you basically have collateral for them. And through some complicated mechanisms, you're able to keep the one-to-one pairing, right? So that the stablecoin is actually stable. There's a lot more behind this that I don't have time to explain right now, but this is where we want to move forward, because these algorithmic stablecoins are the future, apart from cryptocurrencies, right? But algorithmic stablecoins is also what I think central banks will move towards, because just doing a digital euro is less exciting, I would say. But we can enable both of them. The algorithmic stablecoins, they require IOTA smart contracts. And that's what's gonna, I definitely think that these use cases like MakerDAO and so on will be enabled on IOTA as we progress with the network and with the protocol. Yeah. As I understand it, the creator of a smart contract on IOTA will also decide on the committee, its size and which nodes are in it. Will the user of a smart contract be able to easily verify that the committee is not the size of one, or that it doesn't consist only of the nodes run by a single company? Perhaps smart contracts could get some decentralization score. Very, very good question. Absolutely. You can definitely verify who the nodes are. You can also verify their past behavior, because every state transition in IOTA smart contracts is public, right? It's stored in the IOTA ledger, so you can verify the behavior of the committee, and you can obviously verify the size of it and the identities of those behind it. The objective for IOTA smart contracts has always been to offer this flexibility, right? Where you can have a situation where I, as an individual, I just want to deploy a smart contract, and I know the validators, so I just utilize them. Similarly to how some other blockchains are formed today, where they define who the validators are, and they then become the validators. The second option is we do a committee through a consortium, right? You have agreements, and they can them predefined, and they can change. And the ultimate goal is to have an open marketplace of validators where they can be changed if they misbehave, where they can be ranked, where they need to provide a certain amount of security, and where it becomes an open and permissionless network. This is really where we are progressing towards, and that's what we're thinking about. But the beauty is that you have all of these different options. So you can have a permission network running on top of IOTA, which meets the requirements of corporates because they have regulatory requirements. They don't want any data to be public or shared, but they still want to be part of this permissionless network to benefit from its security. But at the same time, we have permissionless, right? Where anybody can deploy a smart contract very easily without having to worry about these things. Similarly to Ethereum, but where you can also build your own committee if you need to. Let's think about a different kind of dApp, right? A decentralized application that has specific requirements. All of that will be possible with IOTA smart contracts. I think that is what will really enable the adoption of IOTA smart contracts, this flexibility. Is the IOTA Foundation already using IOTA for any internal use cases? For example, to speed up business processes? That's an interesting question. We were actually thinking about utilizing IOTA, I think, for some HR processes last year, but ultimately it didn't go through because of various reasons. But I definitely think we should. I wonder which use case actually makes the most sense and where you would speed up the process. Oh, I think where it makes sense is if we have a repository on GitHub, you definitely want to put the hash of the commit on IOTA because now everybody can verify it. That's one use case. We can build something like Gitcoin. Let me just Google it. Something like Gitcoin where you can reward open source development. I think that would be a very exciting application on top of IOTA. I think it will need smart contracts though. So, but I'm thinking about where else IOTA could make sense. I don't know. But it's definitely an interesting question, and we should, like, obviously all of us run our own nodes and participate in the network and have a Firefly wallet, but I'm not sure of which process where IOTA would make sense. I think ultimately IOTA identity will be the gateway to all of these new ecosystems. I think IOTA identity will really be the major adoption factor over the next years to come. I think that's also something that we could then utilize internally. Yeah. Does the AIF create any kind of periodic downward pressure on the price for IOTA? For example, funding itself through selling off its IOTA stash. All right, first of all, that's kind of fucked up. No, we don't do that. One thing that was very important for us at the IOTA Foundation is, unlike other projects, we, especially on the leadership, right, we don't trade. Our role as the IOTA Foundation is to make sure that the ecosystem and the protocol and everything that we build is being built. Our role is not to trade. Our role is not to influence or to do market trading or whatever. That's why we have very strict rules and guidelines also when it comes to the sale of IOTA tokens on the leadership team, right? And the IOTA Foundation itself has a broker in Switzerland, Crypto Finance, and they only sell IOTA tokens. The IOTA Foundation does not trade. And we've never traded in that regard. We don't buy and sell because that would be crazy. And it would be, first of all, it would be a conflict of interest because it's kind of us versus you guys, right? And I think that's kind of very dishonest because ultimately we would then move towards a system where we try to influence the price and utilize our internal knowledge, our insider knowledge to trade against you. I think that's very, very dishonest, and we should absolutely never do that. And the second reason why that makes no sense is because we lose focus. We want to be focused on the bigger things, and we don't want to be stuck up in trading and wasting time in that regard. So yeah, like we don't trade, and we are really focused on building the future. And ultimately, many people in the foundation have invested into IOTA because they believe in it, and they invested into it because this is a multi-year project, and we are really at a very exciting stage right now. So we're getting closer, and yeah, we don't trade. Which podcast do you listen to? Oh, that's an interesting question. Let me actually go on Spotify to check that out. I sort of have a man crush on Scott Galloway. So Scott is this NYU professor who has like this no bullshit attitude to business and life. So I really like him, and I listen to his podcast. What I always listen to is the Pivot podcast. So Pivot is really good. It basically gives you like an update on what's happening in the business world, especially Silicon Valley and that type of stuff, what's happening with IPOs. I listen to the Prof G Show, which is the podcast for Scott Galloway. I also really like the podcast How to Save a Planet. It's basically about climate change and what we can do, what the solutions are. And that's about it. I try to listen to podcasts, but it's kind of difficult sometimes, mostly when I try to attempt at cooking. But yeah, I think podcasts are quite useful. And those are the podcasts that I primarily listen to. Hi Dom, after Chrysalis and Coinbase, what happens to old IOTA tokens on the old network that don't get transferred? Will the IF keep old nodes running even after Coinbase for people to be able to swap, or will you eventually burn these tokens? What's going to happen is that these tokens will be claimable by the owners through a manual process, so where they need to be verified. We don't need to run nodes on the old network because you can verify it all through cryptography. And the snapshot, right, where the addresses and their balances that's public information. Everybody can verify that. We are right now checking for how long that will be. Most likely what will be happen with unclaimed tokens where, for example, the owner has lost their keys, or where the owner has kind of forgotten that they have IOTA tokens, which, by the way, happens more often than many of you think. For that, I think what we should be doing is we should leave it up to the community to decide what happens with them. So I think we'll give a governance vote where all of you can decide whether these tokens should be burned, whether they should be utilized for the ecosystem, or I don't know, right? That's what we leave up to the community to decide, because ultimately the IOTA Foundation is only here to develop the software, and the IOTA ecosystem should make these decisions. Let me do 2 more questions, or maybe I don't know, how long do you guys want to go? I need to drink more water. Hi Dom, already asked you on Twitter, so just a small reminder, please share some book recommendations. A reading list that influenced you the most, or where you learned the most. Yeah, definitely. I'll try and publish that soon. I think what influenced me the most is the internet, because on the internet you can learn anything that you want, which is really exciting. So I did Coursera, I did edX courses, and there were some important books as well. But I'll try and publish a book reading list. And I think it would be great if we can think about some kind of portal where the community can also share their book reading, because I think also people from the foundation should be able to share their list. But yeah, it's a good idea. I'll try and do that. I've been trying to revive my blog for some time because the current one is kind of shitty. But I hope that I can get to that this weekend. And will mana be sold on an open marketplace? And if so, is the hope that businesses will realize that it is more cost efficient to run their own node, therefore expanding the capacity of the network? Ultimately, the objective is to offer freedom to decide. This flexibility is very important when it comes to the adoption. But I definitely think that most companies will move towards acquiring IOTA tokens, generating their own mana with their own nodes. But yeah, read the mana post. I think that should explain it further. By the way, why are some of these questions in gray while some of the others are in white? Because this one has a higher rating than the other ones. Any of you that know more about Reddit than I do? I don't know. This will remain a mystery. 2 questions. With Chrysalis being officially scheduled for the 28th of April, can we expect it to start with auto-peering? What was very important for us with Chrysalis is to have a sort of feature freeze. And that feature freeze was at the end of February, so that we could do the audit, so that we can do the review. I don't want to speak for the team here. I think they have to provide their opinion on whether it's possible or not. Just ask on Discord, right? They're all there. They're all friendly people. So just ask them there, and then they can tell you if auto-peering will be part of it or not. Nectar was scheduled for April in order to have both serially released, to not confuse the community. Does that now mean Nectar is expected by May? It's an interesting question. I'm still debating about this myself. You know, one of the difficult things that we face right now is we have this clear roadmap of where we want to go. And the problem is that these things happen simultaneously. It's not like, oh, this month we do Chrysalis, this month we do smart contracts, this month we do mana, this month we do Corticide. It's all happening at the same time. And the problem is, speaking about these things can be very confusing because there's such novel concepts. And in one post we have mana, in another post we have the Chrysalis date. And I just always worry about confusing with our messaging, because we have to be very focused to really relay the message more clearly. That's why we've put more emphasis on Chrysalis so far. And now, beginning of April, we'll definitely also do more about Corticide, expanding mana. I think ultimately we will be doing both at the same time, because we have to educate the market in that regard. On everything that's happening, because it's not just ending with Chrysalis. Chrysalis is more like the start of all of this new dawn, and we're really progressing with these different things. So yeah, but no, the next release right now is still scheduled for April. And you can already see what's happening on GitHub and also on Discord if you go to the Go Shimmer discussion channel there to engage with the community there. So Nectar is still scheduled for April. If anything changes, we'll obviously communicate it to you guys. But that's the current strategy. I think what's more exciting is what comes after Nectar. Because with Nectar, we are really scheduling this incentivized testnet, and with Chrysalis out of the way, we're able to focus 100% on Corticide. So I think that will be super exciting, and also will mean that we are able to accelerate some of the development there. Why is Buffy the Footster so much better at predicting ETAs than the IF? I think that's even himself, right? So he speaks about himself in the third person. ETAs. Let's discuss ETAs. ETAs are a mix of expectations, a mix of pressure, and a mix of imperfect information. Right? I think that makes up ETAs, and we're getting better at it, I would say. We once were really terrible at giving these estimates, where we were too overhyping, I would say. And I think we've learned from those mistakes. Then we kind of went to a phase where we don't do any ETAs anymore. But I think that just doesn't give you guys a roadmap of where we're heading and what the next major thing is. And now we are moving towards ETAs that are more realistic, but sometimes we have these unexpected factors that push us back. I think we are getting better at it. And this isn't just something that is related to IOTA. Everybody in this space has problems with ETAs. Some of you might remember the infamous 2 weeks in Ethereum. And I think we'll just have to move forward, because ultimately we are working on these incredibly complex protocols. And it's not just about one singular aspect of it, right? We have an entire ecosystem to also worry and care about. And yeah, like we're really moving forward with that. I'm progressing at better predicting them. Hey Dom, what are the list of books you've read recently that helped reinforce what the direction of the foundation is going with IOTA, the right one? I just recently finished a Jeff Bezos book, Invent and Wonder. It was very interesting just to see the clear focus that he had, because what the book is basically about the last, I think, since 1995. Every year he published a shareholder letter, and the book basically republished those shareholder letters. And it's just really amazing to see the clear focus that Bezos had when it comes to running IOTA. And he really has this it's day one mentality. Right? You should always be focused on quick decision making. You should never be evolving into a boring big corporate, and you should really also encourage failure, because failure is what helps us progress. Without failure, we are not really able to innovate. Without failure, we will not progress, and that's something that I find very interesting. What I'm really trying to figure out is, like, when it comes to this core focus, with IOTA, it's just so difficult to have a core focus, because the core focus of the core objective of IOTA is to be production ready. But in order to be production ready, we have to do 10 things at once, right? Because if we don't do these 10 things at once, we're missing out on the market, and IOTA is less appealing than others. We have less funding, and it just like causes this cascade. And it's really, really interesting to think about what should we focus on. And ultimately, my conclusion is we've become a lot better at focusing and saying no to things. By the way, I think one of the most important lessons in life is to really be able to say no to things that you really, really want to do, simply because you understand that you have to focus on something in order to deliver it. And I think right now we've really become good at focusing what matters the most. Focus on Chrysalis so that we get that out of the way, and don't be rushed by digital assets. Don't be rushed by smart contracts, because all of that can come afterwards. Right now, the big focus is Chrysalis. So I think we as an organization are getting better at that. And it's just difficult to do this one-to-one mapping of a traditional company to crypto, because crypto, I would say, is just so much more insane. And when it comes to the uncertainty, when it comes to the problems that you have, when it comes to the ecosystem, right? Usually having a normal company doesn't mean that you have thousands of fans that are cheering and that are building together with you. So yeah, I think the Invent and Wonder book was pretty good. Right now, I'm also a big fan of Howard Marks, who is like a hedge fund manager, and he talks a lot about cycles, market cycles, and he talks about the most important things in finance. So I'm reading his books as well right now, so they're very exciting. But I'll make a reading list so that all of you can also share your thoughts about them. Let me do one more question, and then we wrap this up. Is there a chance that you're working on an interface for the trading platform eToro so that it is possible to transfer the IOTAs into your wallet? We don't do that stuff. I think it's eToro, up to eToro to do that. I'm not even sure if they do it for other cryptos, by the way. What do you guys think? But yeah, ultimately, if you don't hold your crypto, it's not your crypto. And I think that's an important thing to keep in mind, that you should always make sure that you have your crypto in your wallet. And we as the foundation can only support those exchanges to do it. Yeah, no, I think that was it. As I said in the beginning, it's always awkward to end these talks. I think what's important to keep in mind is we have a concrete launch date now for Chrysalis. So that's very, very exciting that we're moving forward with that. And we know where we are heading. And other than that, going back to my Friday talk, it's important to keep in mind what is the objective and where you're heading. And the role that we play as a IOTA Foundation is to show the path where we want to head and to remove as much uncertainty as possible, so that along the way, along us realizing this vision, that we're able to succeed, that we're not able to fall back. And one of the most frustrating things about IOTA in the early days was this sort of mindset of taking 3 steps forward and 2 to 4 steps backwards. And it caused a lot of emotional stress for all of us, especially people in the foundation. But now we are in a different phase, right? We move forward. We don't take step backwards anymore, and we have a very clear path and journey ahead of us. And it's very exciting to see it all unfold, and also the use cases that we'll be able to build together with all of you. So with that in mind, make sure to look at the libraries for Chrysalis. Make sure to get up to date on Firefly, and make sure to join us on Friday when we're going to recap the week and when we're going to talk about Mana with some people from the IF. Without further ado, have a good rest of your Wednesday and speak with you guys soon. Bye-bye.